One of the simplest things I like to share with people is if you're wondering if it's inner chatter or inner dialogue, ask yourself if it's helpful. Hello, we are so glad you're here for this edition of Docworking, the Whole Physician podcast. And today we are talking about that voice in your head that will just not shut up, inner chatter, and some ideas for quieting that voice in a way that it doesn't disrupt what you're doing. I am thrilled, as always, to be joined by one of the lead coaches at Docworking.com, Dr. Gabriella Dennery. And Gabriella, I know I'm somebody that when I'm not paying close enough attention, my brain can really take over and start a cacophony of noise in there. What do we mean by inner chatter or that loud voice in our heads?
I like to distinguish between inner chatter and inner dialogue, because the inner dialogue is not necessarily a bad thing. It's when you get to rehearse your marriage proposal. It's when you start mulling ideas into your head. There's nothing wrong with a bit of introspection and to think things through. But when it tips over to the chatter, and I like to think of the chatter as that little green gremlin on your left shoulder who starts whispering all sorts of nonsense in your ear. It comes from perfectionism. It comes from fear of being judged. It comes from, fear of not doing the right thing, this pressure of performance. Particularly in physicians, there's always a lot of self-doubt from the physician clients I work with and from other professionals as well. People are constantly questioning their abilities. And that can get exhausting and extremely stressful. And you're on constant fight, flight, freeze response. You're constantly activated, constantly stressed, because you're constantly thinking about whether or not you're doing the right thing the right way at the right time. And so that's the chatter we're talking about today, is how do you calm that down so you can make room for something else? And so there are easy, practical ways of doing that. But first of all, I would say, do you know you have the chatter going around? We spend a lot of time between worry, and we talked about this a lot, worrying about what may or may not happen in the future. And on the other hand, ruminating, as we mentioned before as well, of the past and what happened already, but we can't really change at this point because we're here now. And so we're vacillating between these two, especially those worry thoughts about the future, the what ifs. Then it's about how to really silence those voices, the what ifs and the rumination. And where are you now today in the middle, in that present moment? So I would say, before we start talking about specific ways that you can start breaking and quieting those voices, Jill, what do you think about the definition of inner chatter versus inner dialogue? And is there something you wanted to add?
I think you just, as always, said it so beautifully. If you are noticing that you're having inner chatter, according to the work of Stephen Hayes and others in this area of psychology called acceptance and commitment therapy. And I'm not a therapist, but I really like what they say. The first step is just kind of noticing, as you said, because when you're noticing, you're out of that sort of reactive and sometimes amygdala-driven part of your brain that's reacting without thinking and that's, as you said, ruminating or spinning, and moving into that wiser place. Some people call it the self with a capital S. Some people call it access to internal wisdom. But it's that place that's, as I say, it's a better person to drive your bus than that chattery, reactive, usually protective, but not very effective part of ourselves that's trying to keep us safe, but it's not really sophisticated and not able to innovate or lead us particularly well. And I think, one of the simplest things I like to share with people is if you're wondering if it's inner chatter or inner dialogue, ask yourself if it's helpful. Because a lot of times it's like, oh my gosh, this record is playing over and over and over again. It plays all the time. There's not enough time. You should have done that differently, but it doesn't change any behavior. And so it's like, oh yeah, that's not helpful. And when I can just identify it as not helpful, I take myself back into that place of the observer, as you said, back into the present moment where I'm more capable usually of making better decisions, which lead to better actions. So that's kind of how I frame it up. What ideas do you have for people to be able to let the inner dialogue get the microphone away from the chatterers in their brains?
First of all, how the chatter shows up. More specifically, I think some of the weapons that little gremlin on the left shoulder uses to really throw you off stride include comparisons, would be something that we also mention a lot and we can't mention enough, because comparing yourself to other people is probably a very just violent form of inner chatter. Another one is when you say, I'm not enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not fast enough. I'm not good enough. Anytime you associate not enough in a sentence, then that's your chatter. That's very, very active as well. And another way is when you're unfocused, when you're scattered. Are you chattering? Are you talking in your own head about what you're not doing, should be doing, could be doing? So then not enough, should be doing, could be doing, all that is inner chatter as well. And again, leading to stress and reactivity and overwhelm. So how do you break those patterns? One of the things about inner chatter is that it's very focused. It's a very small focus. You're focusing on you, and that's it. You don't even see the rest of the world. You've got blinders on. And so it's about taking off those blinders and thinking outside of yourself, looking at the world in a different way. And this is another tool, as you say, is this chatter, is this conversation helpful? I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not fast enough. It's like, well, how about telling yourself that you can and just start shifting the conversation a little bit? I think that is helpful in terms of just bringing you out of a certain space and into a new space. Other things that can also help, in addition to just changing your mindset, is physical activity. Get busy with something. Take your brain out of your own head and move it in a different space. And physical activity is always the best thing to do. And yes, it doesn't have to be exercise. It could just be a home project of some sort. Just get into that to break that cycle. Go outside, as we talked about a lot as well. Take breaks. Stretch. Sometimes I'll have my clients stretch at the beginning of a coaching session. And we'll do it on Zoom. Just get up, stand up, move around. Let's stretch the upper body, stretch the lower body, just to, again, reconfigure the brain, reconfigure the thought patterns in an instant. So all these things can absolutely help in breaking that cycle of that inner chatter, because the inner chatter can be very busy and it can overtake everything. So you don't want to let it overtake. You have a choice to say, you know what? I recognize it. I hear it. I can see that, as you said, is it helpful? No, it's not helpful. Let me change the conversation.
I love it. Yeah, I've been talking about this now, starting in my book now, almost 10 years ago, reminding people that the thought, there's not enough time, which triggers the fight or flight response, and that spinning place, kind of, as you said, often the chatter is unhelpful. And I just find that we just are chatting about the same dang thing over and over and over again, somehow expecting different results. And so when we I notice I'm having there's not enough time thought again. We take ourselves out of that place where we're just kind of having that reacting without thinking, or what some people call amygdala hijack. And we make it a lot more likely that we can, as you said, redirect the inner dialogue towards something that's more meaningful, towards something where we're kind of progressing, where we're processing meaningfully, instead of just, spinning your wheels and staying in the same stuck spot.
And one more thing, I think a tool that is very, very helpful, and I think that as coaches and in your coaching as well, you talk about putting things down on paper. Let's say you're planning your week as a way to, again, diffuse the chatter, diffuse the rumination, diffuse the worry, is to start writing, to put it down, to get it out of your system, out of your head, onto a piece of paper is also a very useful, helpful, and quick, practical tool. It can be free writing. It doesn't necessarily have to make sense in the moment, just to get that chatter out. Why? Because now you get to create a dialogue around it. If you talk to somebody, a trusted partner, about what you're worried about, you get to put it in more clear terms, as opposed to, again, it's swimming and swirling around. And so there are other ways to also deal with it, to give it more sense. Write it out, talk to somebody about your concerns or what's going on with you now. That clarifies certain things right there by articulating it, as opposed to just letting it sit inside the mind and doing whatever it wants. What do you think about that?
I think it's brilliant, as always. And you've given us some ways to really identify something that a lot of us feel like is happening to us, but we don't know how to change it. And so all of the different ideas that you shared, I think, are just so helpful to be able to begin the practice, right? This isn't something you're supposed to just wave a magic wand and fix tomorrow. It's a practice of bringing yourself into the place where your mind can help and work for you and not feel like it's taking you down all these rabbit holes in different directions as often. So brilliant ideas, really helpful. If you, like me, learned a lot today by listening to Gabriella, or from both of us by listening to a conversation, We just ask one tiny thing, take about 5 seconds and go give a 5-star review. That is the engine that helps drive us forward to be able to continue bringing this to you. Thank you so much for being with us. And as always, we love having you on Docworking, the Whole Physician Podcast. We have something new and exciting to tell you about, so I want you to hop over to docworking.com. Docworking Thrive is getting ready to launch in a very short time. And what that is a subscription service for physicians. It includes an excellent self-paced course called STAT that is all about quick wins for living well. It is group coaching. It is a Facebook group where you have a chance to connect to other physicians and coaches to ask questions about things that are happening in your life. And it also includes weekly video tips to come and give you advice on important things in your life. So we're really excited about this. The price is almost too good to be true. It's so good. And I really think it's going to be a fabulous support network for physicians. So we hope you hop on over, check out Docworking Thrive today. And until next time, we'll see you on Docworking, the Whole Physician Podcast.
Hello, and thank you for listening. This is Amanda Taryn. I'm the producer of the Docworking podcast. If you enjoyed our podcast, please like and subscribe. We would also love it if you checked out our website, which is docworking.com. And you can also find us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. On Instagram, we are Docworking1, and that is with the number 1. When you check us out on social, please let us know what you would like to hear on the podcast. Your feedback really means a lot to us. And if you're a physician with a story you'd like to tell, please reach out to me at amanda@docworking.com to apply to be on the podcast. Thank you again, and we look forward to talking with you on the next episode of Docworking, the Whole Physician Podcast.